For more on this, I'm joined by Norman Roule, former senior intelligence official. Norman, a pleasure to have you on the show. First of all, we've just been hearing from Donald Trump in the last half an hour, and he's saying Russia is an extraordinary threat to the US. We did see a smiling President Putin meeting US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Witkoff has been criticized for the tone of his previous visits to Russia. After Trump's comments, how constructive and useful were these talks?
Good evening to you and to your viewers. There is no evidence yet that the current round of talks have been constructive. That will only be measured in coming days as we see whether the pace of Russian air attacks on Kyiv, on Ukrainian civilian centers declines, and there's no indication that has happened. We can expect Russian statements on these talks to remain upbeat because that's part of their general propaganda. But I think we can also expect to see in coming days American statements to be increasingly strong and severe. The president is clearly out of patience, and he's putting the pressure on Moscow to make concessions before Friday.
And that's interesting because given Trump's history of unpredictable positions on Ukraine, he is holding a phone call right now with Volodymyr Zelensky. What should we be expecting from this? Because now, as you said, we see the frustration clearly with Moscow.
Correct. And I think the president's position, based upon his statements, is that he has been extraordinarily patient and generous with Moscow. But there have been hundreds of civilian strikes on civilian targets by Russia. The Russians have not demonstrated sincerity in any of the talks. They have not provided the president with any indication that his patience would lead to any sort of truce in any shape or form. And at this point, the president needs to provide a package of pressures, and that pressure will be sanctions, support for Ukraine, public statements that shows that America is united in this statement, in this position, and a constant pressure as he moves towards Friday's plan for secondary sanctions on Russia's trade partners.
Norman, let's talk a little bit about military action against Ukraine from Russia. Today's meeting comes as Russian forces hit a recreational center in southern Ukraine, killing at least 2 people and injuring many more. Does this strike make military sense?
Well, it doesn't, but let's begin by saying that Russia conducted these strikes knowing that Steve Witkoff was coming to Moscow, knowing that the president's deadline was approaching. This was an opportunity for Moscow to show flexibility and an interest in peace. And instead, Moscow launched 45 drones against civilian targets in several cities, killing children. Now, we have seen hundreds of Russian missile and drone attacks on civilian targets throughout Ukraine. There is a raft of evidence. So why does Russia do this? And there are good reasons for Russia to do this based on its military doctrine. It disrupts and destroys critical infrastructure. This would work against Ukraine's morale. This disrupts its energy. It weakens civilian infrastructure, even moves populations within Ukraine to weaken Ukraine's ability to respond. And it also promotes the possibility that Ukraine is willing to make concessions just to reduce the pace of Russian attacks. But it shows that Russia is not following laws of war. Russia is not interested in reducing these sorts of attacks. And again, it puts the president in a difficult position because this cannot be defended. And Russia, again, shows it's not interested in halting these sorts of attacks. These attacks last night were a very important signal. Russia had an opportunity to change its ways, and it did not do so.
And Norman, President Trump has imposed an additional 25% tariff on India over these oil imports, the Russian oil imports. Trump is really starting to play his sanctions card, and we've seen that when it comes to Russia. But does Putin believe he still has the upper hand? Because as we said, he's intensifying attacks on Ukraine. He doesn't seem to be listening, and the package of sanctions that could be coming on Friday haven't deterred Russia at all.
Well, a couple of things are happening. The Russians are leaking the story that they may be interested in a possible a cessation of air attacks by Friday. That's probably to delay sanctions. Russia is also leaking that perhaps their territorial interests are more modest, only several oblasts or portions of eastern Ukraine. But all indications are that Vladimir Putin has never veered from his original objectives, which is the ultimate destruction of Ukraine as an independent, sovereign country. This said, the president's approach over recent days and weeks has been a package approach. And the sanctions that the president has placed upon India are consistent with what we've seen in the last week and a half. The president has messaged senators that he would be doing this, and placing such significant sanctions on India will also message Turkey, China, and other countries that the president is serious. And therefore, this will also produce diplomatic pressure, hopefully, by these countries on Russia to make concessions and come to a peaceful approach for this conflict.
So a lot of people are wondering if Donald Trump is going to impose. We have seen this new 25% tariff on India over Russian oil today. But many people are saying, is Donald Trump going to chicken out on Friday and he's not going to go full steam ahead with this package against Russia? What's your feeling on that?
I think it's less important to focus on timing and more important to focus on the ultimate purpose of all of these actions. President Trump has shown flexibility on timing. He's willing to make extensions to tariff deadlines routinely, but ultimately he doesn't veer from his objective as to what he's looking for from his interlocutors. And in this case, he's looking for serious peace negotiations from Russia, and his willingness to target Delhi, which has gone from 0.2 of 1% of its oil sales from Russia prior to this conflict to now almost a third of its oil sales from Russia with profound sanctions is a powerful message that he is willing to be committed to this approach by Friday. I would not think that he is going to change his ultimate objective, but it is possible he may change the deadline by a few days, but I would not read too much into that.
And just a response from India, they say the US tariffs unfair, unjustified and unreasonable after Donald Trump did announce an additional 25% tariff on India over Russian oil imports today. Norman Roule, thank you so much for your analysis and insights.